the member from Timiskaming Cochrane.
Thank you, Speaker. Today it's truly an honour and a pleasure to rise in the House and speak in response to my colleague Percy Hatfield and his bill, the Poet Laureate of Ontario, in memory of Gord Downie. And I think Gord Downie is a very good example of the power of poetry and its lasting power over years and years and years. And another great example is when you hear the poem In Flanders Fields, right? It says so much in so few words. I don't have a personal history with Gord Downie. I think we wish we could all have. But he has made a big impact in my family's life, and as he has in all ours. So, on two occasions. The first occasion, my youngest daughter came home from school and she had a project that she was a bit worried about. And the project was she had to demonstrate a musical group's impact on the country and the meaning of their music. And I'm not going to say how old Vicky is, but she's from the generation. Their music's a bit, the stuff she listened to was a bit meaningless in my opinion. So and her and I went and we looked up the Tragically Hip catalog. And we had such an amazing time together looking through the lyrics and researching what those lyrics truly meant. It was such a bonding experience. And I think every Canadian who's ever listened to the Tragically Hip, but when you really study, I listened to the Tragically Hip, but I never really studied them until my daughter came home with that project. And that made a big difference in our lives. The second impact the Tragically Hip had on our family, and I'd like to give a shout out to the Kirkland Lake Festivals Committee, because in 2015, the Tragically Hip played for 2 sold-out shows in Northern Ontario, in Kirkland Lake. And that was a true bonding experience for us all. I don't think anyone in those arenas, in that arena, ever felt more Canadian than at those 2 concerts. It was fantastic. It was, and again, it's a shout out to the Festivals Committee, because I don't think they made money on those, but they sure brought everyone together, and it was an incredible experience. And that is something that the Tragically Hip and Gord Downie has brought to us all. And it shows the power of words, the power of well-crafted words, the power of poetry, and how poetry can last indefinitely and can truly represent an area. We've heard that other areas across the world, across the country, across the province have poet laureates. And there is also a poet laureate in my riding. The little town of Cobalt has a poet laureate, and Cobalt has a very it was once named the most historic town in Canada. It had a silver boom in the early 1900s. It went from 0 to 30,000 people, and now it's at 1,200. But now, because of electric cars, it might boom again, because now it's not silver that's in demand, now it's cobalt. And I would be remiss if I didn't read a poem by Anne Margetson, the poet laureate of Cobalt. The Blacksmith. Fred LaRose was a blacksmith in Cobalt Town. At a log cabin near the rail lines, he often did frown, for he worked long hours to make a living quite hard, hammering and toiling away with great regard for the work he had to do, and a fox often came to view. That drove him crazy, seeing the fox. What could he do to the pesky fox? Looking all cute, his head on one side, his great frustration so very hard to hide. Working it one day with his furnace and hammer, his frustration made him splutter a little and then stammer. He lifted his hand to send his hammer flying high, but the fox ran off without a yelp, whimper, or cry. Then the hammer hit the rock, and there before his eyes was the wonderful sight of silver. Such a great surprise. After a while, he was happy to sell his share of silver bright and all the cobalt and other ore that was hidden from sight. He sold his claim for quite a price and retired to Quebec. Although he lost all his capital, he thought, oh, what the heck. The log cabin is still standing, but moved to safer ground. I wonder if the ghost of the fox close by has ever been found. That, Speaker, is an example. In that one poem, that is the legend of how the silver was found in Cobalt. The train was being built to get to the clay fields, actually, to get to the farming country. And the legend is that Fred LaRose threw his axe at a fox, and that's how they found silver. No one really knows if that legend is 100% accurate, but Fred LaRose was a blacksmith in Cobalt, and many people came to Cobalt. Many people made a fortune in Cobalt, and many people, as did Mr. LaRose, lost their fortune that they made in Cobalt. But it shows how the power of poetry in a few verses can show the story of a town, of a province, of a country, and that's why we fully support the bill to create a poet laureate, and we fully agree that it could be done before the House rises. Thank you, Speaker.
You further debate.